This week at Lebanon Row, we're talking about using our speech. And along with Andrew Pate and J.D. Buckner, I'm Adam Fawn. This is the week where it's all three of us again. Back to the
dynamic trio.
There we go. There we go. We are looking this week at one particular verse from the pen of Paul, Colossians 4 and verse 6. And before we even read the verse, guys, I've got a question. When did salty speech become a bad thing?
Like a salty dog? It had to be the Navy.
I'm not going there. Those guys are bigger than I am. But Colossians 4 and verse 6 is famous for describing the speech we're supposed to have as being seasoned with salt or being salty. But we use the phrase salty speech to mean bad stuff.
Right.
And I was just asking, I wonder if you all looked it up because I didn't. I've always wondered where that came from because Colossians 4 and verse 6, Paul said, "Let your speech always be gracious." The old King James just has "always with grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." Now there's a couple of things we want to talk about in the few minutes on this video. One is the idea of gracious speech, and the other is that idea of seasoning our speech with salt. They tie together, but we want to kind of take each one in turn here. Andrew, when you read that part that talks about having gracious speech or speech being with grace, what does that make you think of? How does that play out in our everyday life?
I guess no matter the situation, I guess you put yourself in with, conversations that you have. It makes me look at, with you speaking that way, I guess try to bring out the best in others whenever you talk to one another. We often put people down. We often don't really use our words the way we should. So that's what I think about when that comes to mind.
Okay. JD, what about you when you hear about gracious speech or speech with grace?
I think of someone who, when they are speaking to another, they always, no matter what that person says, they try to look at it from a positive light or take it from a positive direction. And when they respond, even if they may disagree or if that other person has said something ugly, they still respond with kind words, not lying words or anything like that, but using their speech in a gracious way. Like, you may have meant this, and I want to take it for what I think was the best way it could be intended, and I'm going to respond to you, and I may disagree, but I'm still going to be kind and use nice words instead of...
We hear the word grace, we hear that old definition of unmerited favor. And that ties into, often we only talk about it when we think about our salvation. God extends His grace toward us. But part of the reason that happens is because we're supposed to extend grace to other people. And here Paul makes sure to tell us that includes what we say to other people. That, like you said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, even if they don't deserve it. Yeah. I'm going to say things in a way or have a conversation go in a way that is to that person's best, their best interest, even if they don't really deserve it, because we would hope that at times people would do the same to us, because a lot of times I don't deserve it. I don't deserve people to speak well to me or even of me at times, but that's what I would hope they would do for me or to me. And I think that next phrase in Colossians 4:6, what Paul is trying to do then is kind of say how that plays out when he says our speech is to be seasoned as with salt. We kind of made that joke at the beginning that salty speech now is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. But Paul is saying here, no, that our words need to be flavorful. They need to have a certain meaning to them. And so when you read that, let's just go in the same order. Andrew, what comes to your mind when Paul says we're to season our speech with salt?
Well, really think about what you say, especially in response to maybe, as we were talking about, if someone says something wrong. I mean, you have to think of the consequences of what you're about to say. And I guess seasoning it with salt would be to put it in a better term, not be so blunt, but be as gracious, be able to give them an idea that you care. So I think that comes to mind, especially when responding to someone.
Okay. JD, what about you?
My thought is salt is delicious. And we should use tasty words. So words that are good words. If you're thinking of salt, like a preservative kind of thing, then you could think of using words that helps preserve a person or that benefits a person, flavors them, makes them feel better, those kinds of things.
That's where I was going to go with the preservation quality. And in part because you said preserve the person, but I would also suggest think of words that'll preserve the relationship.
Right.
Whether it's a friendship, a marriage, just someone you know and are trying to reach with the gospel or whatever, it is really easy, maybe not to end a relationship, but to pretty much destroy it in a handful of words. But I think Paul in part is saying here, think about what you say to preserve, the evangelistic relationship, the marriage, the friendship, the whatever relationship it is. So think of words that are going to do the best to build a bridge instead of just ripping it down, because we can do both in a heartbeat.
Right.
And I love that he ends this verse, and we'll end the video here too, since we're going through the verse and we're at the last part of it. You ever had a situation where you said, I just don't know what to say to that person?
Yeah.
Well, here's your answer. That's exactly how he ends the verse. Let your speech always be with gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Now, there are times our wisdom may not catch up with, with what we need to say. But Paul says we should never really say, I just don't know what to say. Well, I do know how to say everything. Yeah. It's just a matter of coming up with the words, the wise words to say. So I think we kind of lose our excuse, or at least part of our excuse with what Paul says here is, slow down, think about what you're going to say, and then here's the outline of how to say those things. Yeah. Gracious words, seasoned with salt.
What I like most about that last verse is, if you look at verse 1 of chapter 4, you see that Paul is addressing slave owners. It says masters. And he's telling the masters how to talk to their servants. And in this society, in the New Testament, it's very class-oriented. And so here you have one considered a higher class. Paul's telling them how to speak to what is considered by society a lower class. And he's saying, you be kind to them, use gracious words, use salty words, so that you'll know how to talk to everybody. I mean, it's so easy when you talk to somebody that you consider above you in our today world. Like
or even an equal.
Yeah, a celebrity or a dignitary or somebody who can get you something. You always speak kindly to them. But then somebody you consider not as good as you don't care what you say to them or how you treat them. But Paul says, any person in the world, you treat them the same way, and that way you will learn how to treat every person the way you should.
That's a really good point, putting that in the context. And throughout Colossians, especially chapters 3 and 4, he goes through all sorts of relationships, the household, and the church, and then masters and slaves. And that's a good point of, as you said, it's easy sometimes to come up with the right words when I have to, or I can get something from it. But Paul is saying, no matter who you're talking to, we're to be Christians no matter what relationship we're in, no matter what circle of influence we're in, or if we're on the low end of the totem pole or the top of the totem pole. We're to talk the same way and have the same kind of respect. And so we thought this was, obviously it's a verse most of us know, but just kind of looking at it a little deeper and considering the words that we use, no matter who we're talking to, Christians ought to represent Christ. And sometimes that may mean that we have to really stop and think about not just what we say, but how we say it. So we hope this has been helpful to you. We look forward to be back with you again next week. And until then, this is This Week at Lebanon Road.